The room went quiet when I sat with a black eye at the Thanksgiving table. Marin lifted her glass and told everyone the old man got what he deserved, and that her husband taught me a lesson. Cormac sat beside her, smiling as if he had won a prize. I reached into my jacket and slid a black envelope across the table to my daughter. Her hand trembled when she touched it, and color rose to her cheeks. My name is Harlan Pierce, age 67, retired lineman from the power company, and a widower since the spring 2 years ago. I bought my little house in Maple Ridge, a quiet suburb outside Columbus, in 1993 when the trees were thin and the streets had no names yet. The house was built with overtime pay and stubbornness. My hands learned to braid cable in sleet and thunder. My life learned to bend around other people's needs, most of all my children's. I raised Marin and her younger brother, Lyle, through school lunches, night fevers, and broken bike chains. My wife, Eliza, kept the soft parts of our family together. After she passed, I carried those soft parts in a coffee tin and tried not to drop them. Thanksgiving had always meant sliced pears with cheddar, the way Eliza liked it, and a prayer that was more about gratitude than words. This year Marin insisted we host at her place, a new-build townhouse with stone that looked like stone, quartz that looked like ice, and a table long enough to seat 8. The neighbors' houses were close enough to pass a salt shaker between windows. Cormac carved the turkey with a knife that gleamed under the pendant lights. He announced the bird was dry before he cut it, just to own the joke. Everyone laughed, even me, until Marin looked at my eye and said what she said. I did not get the black eye at a bar or in the street. I got it in my own kitchen 3 nights ago, at 9:30, beneath a photograph of Eliza holding baby Marin. The punch landed on the bone near my brow. There is a hollow there that catches sound and memory. The floor was cold and tasted like lemon cleaner. I lay there for a moment to listen to my breath and to the new quiet in the house. Cormac's boots were on my porch the way you leave boots when you plan to step right back into them. He told me he was doing this for my own good. He said a man who forgets promises needs a reminder. I do not forget promises. I write them down. The black envelope began as a note to myself, then a folder, then a case. It lay inside my jacket pocket as marinade sits in the bowl, soaking through. On the outside, in silver ink, I wrote Marin's name. Inside it, things gathered, copies of messages, a bank receipt, a letter from a facility a county over, the kind with a cheerful name and lockable doors. Each piece belonged together like rafters in a roof. I did not want revenge. I wanted a true picture no one could look away from. Family filled the table with the usual chatter. My sister-in-law, Petrina, asked about football. My grandson, little Orion, scraped his fork on his plate and made a sound like a violin learning to sing. The pumpkin pies smiled from the counter. Cormac watched me with the lazy grin of a man who thinks he has already reached the last chapter. Marin's cheeks were pink with wine and pride. She whispered to Petrina, and they both looked at me the way people look at whether they do not plan to respect. I pressed my palms on the table. The wood felt new and oiled, something bought on points and plans. There are pieces of me that never learned to shout. Eliza used to say my quiet made space for other people's storms. After she died, the storms did not stop. They only forgot that I was sheltering them. When Marin brought Cormac home to meet us 8 years ago, he called me sir and asked about my work. He talked about his landscaping business and a big client who paid in cash. Eliza served peach cobbler, and he did not touch the peaches, he only ate the crust. She laughed and scraped extra crust into his bowl. I noticed his eyes move through our house like hands. They measured things. Last winter I started to forget little items. The kettle left on low. A bill that slipped behind the radio. I wrote reminders on sticky notes. Marin offered to help me sort my finances. She said my house was too much for one person and that a retirement community would give me friends and classes. She spoke with concern in her voice, and I tried to hear the love inside it. I told her I would think about it. I also told her I was not ready to sell. The house still held Eliza's shape in the way light painted the hallway at 4 each afternoon. A man is allowed to keep his son. Cormac began visiting more often. He fixed a gutter and left the ladder in my yard for 3 weeks. He offered to take me to look at places where the lawns were perfect and the halls smelled like citrus. The brochures showed laughing men holding bingo cards and women in pastel sweaters. The director at one place called me Mr. Pierce and shook my hand with both of hers. She said my daughter had been such a help. She said the deposit would hold a corner room with a view of a lake that was probably a pond. I pretended to be flattered. I pretended a lot of things during those tours. 2 months ago, Lal called from Oregon and asked if I was happy. I told him happiness is a weather that needs tending. He said he heard from Marin that I might sell. He sounded like he was chewing something he did not want. Lyle and Marin have always been different kinds of children. Marin keeps lists and a tidy car. Lyle keeps maps and a backpack by the door. He offered to fly out. I told him to save his money. Pride is a coat a man wears even in summer. I put mine on and told him I was fine. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet and heard the house settle like an old horse folding its legs. 3 nights ago, I found a paper on my porch in a manila envelope. It was a contract to list my house with Cormac's friend, who is a real estate agent with glossy hair and a smile that looks like a polished floor. My signature was on the line. My hand did not write it. Cormac showed up not 10 minutes later. He said he knew I would get stubborn and that sometimes the old need help to do the right thing. He put his hand on my shoulder. I asked him to remove it. He told me not to raise my voice in my own home. His knuckles made a choice. He walked out before I stood back up. I served myself ice in a dish towel, and the ice tasted like pennies and relief. Now the turkey steamed, and the green beans rattled in a bowl, and I watched Marin open the black envelope. She drew out the first page, the text thread where she told Cormac, "We can move this along if he is stubborn." She moved to the receipt from my bank where a withdrawal had been made from my account at 9 in the morning, on a day I was at the dentist and my card was in my pocket. She looked at the letter on the very bottom, from the director at the cheerful facility, thanking Marin for the deposit and confirming my move-in date on Monday. She looked at me. The room discovered how to be silent again. I did not raise my voice. I said only her name once, the way I said it when she was 5 and had taken a toy from her brother and hidden it behind the sofa. Marin. The second letter in the envelope bore her signature beside mine, written in a hand that tried to copy my old slow strokes. Petrina leaned forward. Orion stopped scraping. Cormac adjusted his watch and reached for his glass. I told Marin there was one more thing in the envelope, a small card with a seal that did not belong at a family dinner. Her face dropped a shade, then another. The card bore the crest of the county clerk. It was a certified copy of a document I filed yesterday morning at 8:02, the exact minute the courthouse doors opened. The document did not sell the house. It did not list it. It did not name Marin or Cormac in any line. It named someone else and something else, something I had been building since Eliza died, and the quiet grew heavy. Marin skimmed the heading and swallowed. Cormac raised his chin as if that could steady a table. The room seemed to tilt. I folded my hands and asked Marin to read the title out loud. She did not. Her lips moved, but made no sound. Petrina reached across to touch her wrist. Orion looked at me with round eyes that asked a question no child should need to ask. The oven clicked as it cooled, one small sound at a time. Cormac tried to smile and found he had forgotten how. My cheek throbbed like a drum in another room. I felt the old coat of pride sliding from my shoulders and something lighter taking its place. The black envelope lay open like a mouth ready to tell the truth. Marin turned the card over, hunting for mercy on the back. There was none. She looked up at me and then at Cormac, who was already calculating a new angle he might cut the world into. I lifted my glass, not to toast, but to steady my hand. The words I had kept for the right moment reached the tip of my tongue and waited. Petrina whispered, "What is it, Harlan?" I met my daughter's eyes, the same green Eliza gave her, and I let the silence stand long enough to be a bridge everyone had to cross. Then I said, very gently, what the document did and whom it named. The knife in Cormac's hand tapped the plate once. The front door camera chimed from the console by the stairs, and the screen lit up with 2 visitors no one expected to see on Thanksgiving afternoon. Marin's mouth opened, then closed. Cormac set the carving knife down with care he did not give my face 3 nights ago. The bell rang a second time, and footsteps moved on the porch. I nodded toward the screen and told Marin that the next page in the envelope would explain why they were here, who called them, and what they had already seen. She lifted the page with shaking fingers as the door handle turned. 2 uniformed officers stood in the doorway, framed by the chill of late November air. Snow had begun to fall in slow flakes that glowed beneath the porch light. Their presence brought the smell of cold metal and rain-soaked leather into the warm dining room. Marin froze, her hand halfway between the envelope and her wine glass. Cormac's jaw tightened, his easy grin gone. "Mr. Pierce?" the taller officer asked, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that silenced even the ticking clock. I nodded. "That's me." He stepped inside, removed his cap, and glanced around the table as if measuring the scene. "We received a report and some documentation earlier today regarding possible financial misconduct and assault. Are Cormac and Maren Keller present?" Petrina gasped. Orion's fork clattered to the floor. Maren's face turned the color of clay. Cormac leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming the table once before he caught himself. "This is ridiculous," he said, forcing a laugh that came out dry. "Someone's made a mistake." The shorter officer held up a folder sealed with a county stamp. "We'll need both of you to come with us to answer a few questions." He turned to me and added, "Mr. Pierce, thank you for submitting the evidence. You've done the right thing." The room swayed for a moment, like a tree struck by a quiet wind. Maren's lips trembled as she whispered, "Dad, what did you do?" "I told the truth," I said. My voice sounded older than it had that morning, but steadier too. "Everything in that envelope has been sent to the district attorney's office. Every forged signature, every bank withdrawal, every message. They know." Cormac shot to his feet, knocking over his chair. "You think you can ruin us, old man? After everything?" The taller officer stepped between us before he could take a step forward. "Sir, sit down." Cormac hesitated, his eyes flicking from me to Maren, then to the officers. For the first time, I saw something close to fear beneath his anger. He sat. Maren's voice cracked. "You didn't have to do this, Dad. We were trying to help you." "Help me?" I asked. "You tried to sell the only home your mother and I built together. You tried to ship me off like a package you didn't want to carry anymore." The taller officer cleared his throat. "We'll continue this down at the station." He turned toward the door. Maren stood, shaking, and placed her hand on my arm. "Please, tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I didn't mean to." I looked at her hand, smaller now than I remembered, and gently removed it. I already told them everything. The officers led them out, Cormac muttering curses under his breath, Maren silent except for the soft sound of her crying. The door closed, and the cold air left with them. The room felt too large suddenly. Petrina's hand rested on my shoulder. "Harlan, you could have told me." "I had to be sure," I said. Talking before I had proof would have sounded like bitterness. I needed the truth to speak for itself. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "You always were the quiet one." I smiled faintly. Eliza used to say that quiet doesn't mean weak. It just means waiting for the right time. Orion climbed onto my lap, his small arms wrapping around my neck. "Grandpa, is Mommy in trouble?" My heart cracked at the sound of his voice. "She made mistakes, Orion. Grown-ups sometimes do. But I still love her." He nodded against my chest, his hair soft against my chin. "I love her too." Outside, the flashing lights faded into the distance. The turkey had gone cold, and the pie looked untouched, but I stayed there with my grandson until his breathing slowed and his head rested heavy against my shoulder. After everyone left, I sat alone at the table. The black envelope lay open in front of me, its edges damp with fingerprints. Beside it was the certified document, proof of the transfer that no one at that table had expected. 2 months earlier, I had visited the county clerk's office not to sell the house, but to protect it. With Lyle's help, I had established a small nonprofit in Eliza's name, the Pierce Home Foundation. The deed to my property now belonged to it, legally untouchable. When my time came, the house would serve as transitional housing for veterans and widowers, men like me who had nowhere left to go. Maren and Cormac's plan to sell it for profit had died the moment I filed those papers. Eliza's picture hung above the mantel, her smile steady as ever. I lifted my glass toward her. "You were right," I whispered. "Sometimes quiet wins." The night stretched long and still. Snow gathered outside, soft and clean, covering the tracks of those who had gone. But beneath that stillness, I could feel something stirring, not triumph, not revenge. Something heavier, something like the beginning of peace. As the clock neared midnight, a knock echoed at the door again, softer this time, uncertain. I stood, heart quickening, and opened it. There, shivering in the cold, stood Maren, her eyes swollen, her coat unbuttoned. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "can I come in?" I hesitated, the porch light washing her face in gold and shadow. Behind her, the snow kept falling, endless and quiet. What I said next would decide whether this night ended in forgiveness or finality. The warmth of the house beckoned behind me. The past lingered outside with her. I drew a slow breath, feeling the pull of both worlds. "Tell me why you're here," I said. Her answer came in a whisper that trembled like the air before dawn. "Because I finally read the rest of that envelope." Marin stood there on the porch, her face pale against the falling snow. Her eyes darted between me and the warm light spilling through the doorway. She was trembling, whether from the cold or the weight of what she carried. I could not tell. The paper in her hand, creased, damp, and torn at the corner, was the last page from the black envelope. I stepped aside without a word. She entered slowly, like someone walking into a church they no longer believed in, but still hoped could save them. The air inside was heavy with the ghost of Thanksgiving dinner, gravy cooling on china, cranberry sauce drying at the edges of the bowl. The smell of turkey mixed with something else, something sharp and raw that came from between us. She stopped at the table, where the empty chairs still formed a broken circle. "I didn't know, Dad," she said softly. "I didn't know about the foundation, about what you were doing with the house." "You didn't ask," I replied. I sat across from her, the same way I used to when she was little and came home from school crying about something that felt like the end of the world. "You made plans before you listened." She looked down at the paper in her hand. "The letter said you started it last year. For veterans, widowers, people who lost their homes. You used your savings?" "Yes," I said. "All of it. I couldn't take Eliza's memory and turn it into profit. That house isn't a house anymore. It's a promise." Her shoulders shook. She set the paper on the table and pressed her palms over her eyes. "I thought you were losing it," she whispered. "You'd forget things, leave the stove on, call me twice in a row without remembering. Cormac said we needed to act before something bad happened." "Something bad did happen," I said. "You trusted the wrong person." Her hands dropped. Her eyes met mine, full of guilt and fear. "He told me the retirement home would keep you safe, that we could use the money from the sale to help Orion start college early. He said you wouldn't even know. He made it sound like mercy." I studied her face, searching for the little girl who once brought me wildflowers from the yard and called them Mama's garden smile. Somewhere behind the tired lines and smudged mascara, she was still there. "Mercy doesn't come with forged signatures," I said quietly. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I didn't know he hit you," she said. "He told me you fell." The bruise beneath my eye still ached faintly, but not as much as the memory of her laughter when she told the table I got what I deserved. "You believed him," I said, my voice trembling now. "You believed he was helping me. You believed I needed teaching." She sank into the chair and buried her face in her hands. "I did, and I was wrong." The silence between us stretched long and painful. The clock ticked, steady and relentless, as if measuring the distance between our breaths. I looked around the room, the plates, the glasses, the photograph of Eliza above the fireplace, and felt the strange calm that comes after a storm. Marin lifted her head. "They're holding him overnight," she said. "He kept shouting at the officers, saying you set him up. He doesn't understand how much proof you had." "I didn't want to destroy him," I said, "but I couldn't let him destroy what was left of us." She nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I don't blame you." Her voice cracked. "I just don't know how to fix what I've done." "You start by telling the truth," I said. "To the police, to yourself, to your son. That's the first thing Eliza taught us, remember? She said truth is like light. It hurts your eyes at first, but then you can see again." Marin gave a small, broken laugh. "Mom always knew how to make hard things sound holy." "She did," I said, "and she would have forgiven you. I'm trying to learn how." Her eyes widened, as though she did not believe I meant it. I gestured toward the guest room. "You can stay here tonight. The couch still creaks, but the sheets are clean. We'll talk again in the morning, after you've slept." She hesitated. "You'd let me stay?" "This is still your home," I said. "It always will be, even if it takes you a while to deserve it again." Her tears came harder now, and she nodded. I stood and went to the kitchen, poured 2 mugs of cocoa, the way Eliza used to on nights when forgiveness was hard to find. When I came back, Marin was holding Eliza's photograph in her hands. "I forgot how much she smiled," she whispered. "She never stopped," I said, setting the mugs down. Even at the end, we sat in silence, sipping cocoa, the warmth easing the cold between us. The snow outside thickened, blanketing the street in white. The flashing red and blue from earlier had faded, leaving only quiet light through the window. After a long while, Marin said, "What's going to happen to him?" "He'll face what he's done," I replied. "Maybe he'll learn something. Maybe he won't. But that's no longer your burden to carry." She nodded, then looked up. "What about us, Dad?" "That depends on what you do next," I said gently. "If you tell the truth, if you face what you did, if you make things right, then maybe we start over. Slowly, one day at a time." Her shoulders relaxed, and she gave a small, tired smile. "I want to start over." "Then start," I said. "Tomorrow's a good day for it." I rose from the table and turned off the dining room light, leaving only the soft glow of the lamp by the window. Marin stood and followed me down the hall to the guest room. She paused at the door, looking back at me. "I'm sorry," she said once more. "I know," I said. "Sleep now. We'll talk when the sun comes up." When I returned to the living room, I looked again at the photograph of Eliza. The house was quiet, but no longer empty. For the first time in a long time, the silence felt alive. I touched the frame gently and whispered, "I think she's finding her way home." Outside, the snow kept falling, steady and pure. Inside, something fragile began to thaw. Sunlight crept across the floorboards in thin golden stripes, settling on the photographs lining the hallway. The house smelled of coffee and the faint trace of cinnamon rolls from the night before. I stood at the stove, stirring a pot of oatmeal, my back aching in the way it always did after a long night. Marin hadn't come out of the guest room yet, but I could hear her moving. The soft shuffle of her feet against the carpet was strange and familiar all at once, like a song half remembered. The clock above the sink ticked steadily toward 8. I poured myself a cup of coffee and looked out the kitchen window. The snow from the night before lay unbroken, except for 2 sets of footprints that ended at the porch, hers and mine. Beyond that, the street was quiet, the world hushed beneath its blanket of white. Marin appeared in the doorway, wrapped in one of Eliza's old robes. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her voice carried something new, a cautious steadiness. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I replied. I gestured to the chair. "Sit. Eat something." She obeyed, spooning the oatmeal without speaking. The silence between us was not sharp anymore. It had softened overnight, like frost melting on a window pane. I poured another cup of coffee and set it in front of her. "Did you sleep?" I asked. "Not much," she admitted. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that envelope. "Truth has a way of keeping people awake," I said. "But it's better than sleeping through lies." She nodded, her hands clasped around the mug for warmth. "They called from the station early this morning. They said Cormac's refusing to talk until his lawyer arrives. He's blaming everything on me." I sipped my coffee slowly. "He would. They said they might press charges for the forged signatures and the assault. I don't know what happens next. That's not for us to decide anymore," I said. "The law will handle him. What matters now is what you do about yourself." Her eyes filled again, but she didn't look away. "I want to fix things, Dad. I'll tell them everything. I'll sign a statement, admit my part in it. I won't hide anymore." "That's a start," I said quietly. "And after that?" She hesitated. "I want to make it right with you. I want Orion to know his grandfather for who he really is, not the man Cormac painted you to be." I set my cup down and leaned back in the chair. The ache in my chest wasn't anger anymore. It was something gentler, like sorrow that had decided to stop growing. "He'll learn by what you show him, not what you say. Children see the truth sooner than adults do." She looked down at her oatmeal, then back up at me. "You still love me, don't you?" I studied her for a long moment. The lines of her face were sharper now, but her eyes were the same green Eliza had carried through life. "Love doesn't vanish because it's disappointed," I said. "It just waits in another room until you're ready to find it again." Her lip trembled. "I don't deserve that kind of love." "Most of us don't," I replied. "But it's what keeps us from becoming the people who hurt us." She reached across the table and took my hand. It was small and cold, but she held it firmly. "Thank you," she whispered. After breakfast, she helped me clear the table without being asked. The rhythm of it, plates, water, cloth, reminded me of the days when she and Lyle were children, when Eliza hummed and sunlight caught her hair in the same kitchen. When the dishes were done, Marin walked into the living room and stood before the framed photograph of her mother. "I thought I was doing what Mom would have wanted," she said softly. "Keeping you safe, making sure everything was handled. But I see now that I wasn't taking care of you." I was taking control of you. She'd have told you the difference, I said, joining her. Eliza believed in letting people stand on their own feet, even if they stumble. Marin smiled faintly through her tears. I remember. She said strength and dignity walk the same road. We stood there for a long moment, both of us watching the woman who had been our compass. Outside, the snow glittered like broken glass, bright under the morning sun. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. It was Lyle. His voice carried the worry of a son who had read too much news too quickly. Dad, I heard about what happened. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said. Better than I've been in a long while. Marin told me everything, he continued. She called me this morning. She was crying the whole time. She's here, I said, trying to make things right. That's good, Lyle said after a pause. You always believed people could come back from their worst mistakes. I still do, I said, but they have to walk the road themselves. When I hung up, Marin was standing by the door, coat in hand. I need to go to the station, she said. I'll give my statement and take responsibility for what I did. After that, I'll come back, if you'll let me. I nodded. You'll always have a key. She hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged me. It was the kind of hug that said both I'm sorry and thank you without needing words. When she pulled away, her face was set with quiet resolve. She walked out into the cold, her footprints marking a new path through the snow. I stood at the window until she disappeared around the corner. Then I looked at the photograph again. You'd be proud, I whispered to Eliza. She's learning. The house fell silent once more, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt like it was breathing again. The air seemed lighter, as though forgiveness itself had opened a window. I sat down in my old chair by the fire, the one with the worn armrests, and let the warmth seep into my bones. Outside, the world was still covered in white, but beneath it, the thaw had already begun. Somewhere beneath that blanket of snow, roots were remembering how to live again. Days passed with a quiet rhythm that felt almost foreign after so much turmoil. The house seemed to exhale, its creaks softer, its shadows lighter. Each morning I brewed coffee and sat by the window, the steam rising like a small prayer. Marin had kept her word. She met with the police, signed her statement, and told them everything. The detectives called to confirm her cooperation and to say Cormac had refused to speak beyond denials. They expected the case to move forward within the month. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding but hadn't healed. Marin came by daily after her meetings, bringing small peace offerings, fresh bread, soup, or coffee from the cafe Eliza used to love. She never stayed long, but each visit built a bridge, plank by plank, between what we were and what we might still be. I watched her with quiet pride. The guilt that once clouded her face had softened into humility. She had learned to listen. One afternoon, she arrived with Orion. The boy ran straight into the living room, his laughter echoing against the old walls. Grandpa, Mommy said we can build a snowman. I smiled and knelt to button his coat properly. Then we'd better make him taller than the mailbox, or he won't see the road. Orion giggled and tugged me toward the door. Marin followed, her breath visible in the cold air. Together, we built the snowman on the patch of lawn where Eliza once planted roses. Orion named him Henry Frost. When we stepped back to admire him, Marin looked at me, her cheeks red from the chill. He's happy here, she said. I think Mom would have loved that. She would, I replied. She always said a house is alive when there's laughter in it. Marin's eyes softened. I'm sorry it took me so long to remember that. It takes some people longer than others to hear what love sounds like, I said. The important thing is that you're listening now. Later, as Orion played in the snow, Marin and I stood by the fence. Her voice was low when she spoke. The detective said Cormac's lawyer might try to pin everything on me. I'll probably lose the house we shared and the savings I put away. You'll lose some things, I said, but not everything. What you're gaining is worth more than what's gone. She turned toward me. What do you mean? You're getting your life back, I said. The one that belonged to you before fear and pride started writing your choices. Her breath caught in her throat, and she looked away. It doesn't feel like that yet. It will, I said. Forgiveness doesn't arrive all at once. It grows quietly, like spring under the snow. That night, she and Orion stayed for dinner. I made stew the way Eliza taught me, thick and slow-cooked, the kind that filled the house with warmth. Orion fell asleep on the couch before the dishes were cleared. Marin helped me wash up, her movements gentle, unhurried. As she dried the plates, she said, "Dad, I've been thinking about the foundation. The Pierce home." I looked up. "What about it?" "I want to help," she said. "Not because I owe you, though I do, but because I believe in what you're doing. I know some people from my firm who could help with outreach and funding. Maybe I can make myself useful again." Her voice carried a tentative hope I hadn't heard in years. "I'd like that," I said. "But this time, we do it together. No secrets." "No secrets," she repeated, smiling faintly. Before she left, she hugged me again. It was easier this time. Less apology, more affection. I watched her drive away, the taillights glowing red against the snow, and felt a small peace settle inside me. That peace was tested 2 days later when the phone rang again. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, cautious. "Mr. Pierce? This is Officer Delaney. We thought you should know. Cormac posted bail this morning." I gripped the edge of the counter. "Is he staying in the area?" "As far as we know," Delaney said. "The restraining order's active, but I'd still advise keeping your doors locked. If anything happens, call us immediately." "Thank you," I said, hanging up. I stood there in the quiet, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock. Outside, the snow had turned to rain, tapping lightly against the window. The house no longer felt as solid as it had yesterday. That evening, I called Marin. "Lock your doors tonight," I told her. "He's out." Her breath caught on the other end. "Do you think he'll come here?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I know what kind of man he is when he thinks the world's turned on him." "I'll keep Orion with me," she said. "You should stay with someone too, Dad." "I'll be fine," I said. "I've lived through worse storms." After we hung up, I sat in my old chair, the one by the window. The envelope still lay on the mantel, now empty but heavier than ever in memory. I thought of Cormac, his fists, his grin, his greed, and felt no hate, only caution. The night deepened. Around midnight, a car's headlights swept across the living room wall, pausing for a moment before moving on. The wind howled against the glass, carrying whispers of things unfinished. I reached for the photo of Eliza, tracing the edge of her smile. "Keep watch tonight," I murmured. "There's still a chapter left to write." Outside, the rain turned back to snow. In its silence, the past and present waited, holding their breath for what would come next. The next evening unfolded like any other winter night. Quiet, still, the kind of stillness that pressed against the skin and waited for something to break it. I sat in the living room, reading the same page of an old Western novel for the third time, my mind half in the story, half at the window. Snow had started falling again, soft and unhurried, catching in the yellow glow of the porch light. The clock on the mantel ticked toward 10 when I heard the first sound, tires crunching on the frozen gravel outside. My chest tightened. The headlights of a dark pickup cut across the curtains and stopped. No one else would come this late, not in this weather. I stood slowly, the old ache in my knee reminding me of my age. Through the curtain, I saw him, Cormac. He stepped out of the truck, coat collar up, shoulders hunched against the cold. He looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. He walked up the path, his boots leaving deep prints in the snow. I thought of calling the police, but something in me said to wait. There are moments in a man's life when he must face what's been haunting him, not with anger, but with truth. When he reached the porch, I opened the door before he could knock. His eyes flicked up in surprise. "You knew I'd come." "I expected as much," I said. "You've never been good at walking away from unfinished business." He gave a small, bitter laugh. "You turned my life upside down, old man. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone. You think that makes you right?" "I didn't make you anything," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." He stepped closer. The porch light caught his face, tired, unshaven, eyes red from sleeplessness. "You think you're the victim here? I was just trying to give your daughter a better life. She deserved more than some half-rotten house filled with your ghosts." "This house isn't rotting," I said. "It's living. It holds what you'll never understand. Memory, love, and work earned by honest hands." He sneered. "You think that matters? She'll lose everything when this is over. So will you. You'll die alone in this place, and all that pride won't keep you warm." I met his eyes. "I've already been alone, and it didn't break me. You mistake quiet for weakness." He stepped forward until we were almost face to face. "You think you've won, don't you?" I shook my head. There's no winning when family falls apart. There's only what's left to save. Something flickered across his face then, something raw and tired. He looked past me into the house, as though expecting to see Marin there. She won't forgive me, he said. Not after what happened. She might, I said, if you let her see the truth. He laughed bitterly. You sound like some preacher. Truth doesn't pay bills or fix reputations. No, I said, but it can make a man worth something again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind picked up, blowing snow across the porch. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets and turned away, staring at the yard. They froze my accounts, he muttered. The business is gone. My name's Dirt. I warned you that shortcuts cost more than they pay, I said. He looked back at me, his eyes hollow. You really believe this house will help anyone? You think a few broken men will find hope here? I don't think it, I said. I know it. Hope grows in quiet places, when someone decides not to give up. He shook his head and stepped down from the porch. You're a fool, Harlan. This isn't over. Then end it right, I said. Go tell the truth. Make peace while you still can. He stopped halfway to the truck, snow falling thick around him. He didn't turn, but his voice carried back, low and rough. You're stronger than you look, old man. I watched as he climbed into the truck and drove away, the sound of the engine fading into the dark. The house behind me felt alive again, as if it had been holding its breath. I closed the door and leaned against it, my hands trembling, not from fear but from the weight of what had passed. Later that night, I called Marin. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight with worry. Dad, are you all right? He came by, I said. He's gone now. She gasped. Did he hurt you? No, I said. He's angry, but more lost than dangerous. Should I come over? No, I said. Stay with Orion. You've already faced enough of him. She was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, thank you for calling me first. I would have been terrified not knowing. I promised no more secrets, I said. And I mean to keep that. The next morning brought a pale sun and a sky washed clean of clouds. Cormac's footprints were still on the path, half buried in new snow. I stood at the window, watching them fade, and thought about what it meant to let go, not to forget, but to release the anger that kept a man chained to what hurt him. Marin arrived an hour later with Orion, carrying a box of pastries and a small smile. She looked stronger, lighter somehow. Did you sleep? She asked. A little, I said. Enough to dream. About what? Eliza, I said. She was hanging curtains in the foundation house. Said it needed more color. Marin laughed softly. Then I'll make sure it has some. We sat at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the wood. Orion played with his toy truck on the floor, humming to himself. For the first time in a long while, the house sounded like home. I looked at Marin and said, when spring comes, we'll start fixing up the back rooms. The foundation needs to open by summer. She nodded. We will. Together. Outside, the snow began to melt, small rivulets of water tracing new paths down the driveway. Life, it seemed, was beginning again, quiet but unstoppable. Still, somewhere beyond that calm, I knew Cormac's shadow lingered. He had left, but men like him rarely vanish. They drift, watching for cracks to slip through. I turned to the window one last time and whispered, if he comes back, he'll find a house stronger than before. Eliza's photograph caught the light just then, her smile soft and steady. The house, the family, the future, they all felt ready to stand again. Winter surrendered slowly that year. Snow turned to rain, and the rain carved rivulets along the driveway until the earth showed through again. Each morning brought new sounds, the drip of melting icicles, the chirp of birds returning to test the thaw. I spent most days on the porch, repairing the railings and repainting the shutters, preparing the house for what was to come. The Pierce Home Foundation was more than a name on paper now. It was becoming something real. Marin came by most mornings after dropping Orion at school. She carried files, lists, and that same quiet determination that once made her a relentless attorney. The difference now was that her drive had softened into purpose. I met with the county clerk. She told me one morning as we spread papers across the table. They've approved the zoning change. You can officially house residents by summer. That's sooner than I expected, I said, my hand pausing over the blueprint. Your mother would have been proud. Marin smiled, the kind of smile that held both gratitude and regret. I've been trying to do this the way she would have done it, patiently, carefully. I even caught myself humming one of her songs while sorting donations. Eliza had a way of putting her spirit in people, I said. Even when she was gone, she never really left. The house was busy again. Volunteers from the community came on weekends to paint walls and haul furniture. Lal flew in from Oregon to help with repairs. The laughter that filled the rooms echoed off the walls like the past had come home to listen. For the first time in years, I woke up each day with something to look forward to. Yet beneath the renewal, a faint unease remained. Cormac had not resurfaced since that night on the porch, but rumors drifted through town. Someone had seen his truck parked behind a derelict barn a few miles east. Another said he'd been asking questions about the foundation. Marin tried to hide her worry, but I saw it in the way her eyes flicked to the window whenever a car slowed near the house. One evening, as twilight bled into the horizon, I found her in the living room, sorting through donation receipts. "You're thinking about him again," I said. She didn't deny it. "He's not the kind of man who just disappears." "No," I said, "but sometimes people like that burn themselves out chasing the wrong things. Let him fade. Our job is to build something better than what he broke." She gave a small nod, though her expression stayed tight. "I just want to make sure Orion's safe." "He is," I said firmly. "He has you. And he has a family that knows how to stand again." That night, after she left, I sat by the fire, staring into the orange glow. The flames flickered across the room, touching Eliza's photograph with soft light. I thought about what forgiveness really meant. It wasn't about letting go of what had been done. It was about refusing to let bitterness take the place of love. As the fire crackled, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Marin. I drove past the house again. "The lights in the old barn are out. Maybe he's finally gone. Sleep easy, Dad." I set the phone down and whispered, "I'll try." Weeks passed. The thaw gave way to spring. Green returned to the yard, pushing through patches of frost like courage through doubt. The first daffodils bloomed along the fence line where Eliza once planted them, stubborn and bright. On a mild Saturday morning, the town held a small ceremony to dedicate the Pierce home. The mayor gave a speech about legacy and compassion. Volunteers clapped. I stood at the front steps, hands in my pockets, feeling the weight of years lift. Marin spoke next, her voice clear and steady. "My father built this home with his hands," she said, "but he built this purpose with his heart. It stands not as a monument to what was lost, but to what can be found again: dignity, trust, and second chances." When she finished, the crowd applauded, and I felt Eliza there in the quiet between the sounds. Marin looked at me, and I nodded. That was her moment, not mine. Later, after everyone had gone, Marin and I sat on the porch. The house looked proud, its white trim shining under the spring sun. "You did it," she said. "We did it," I corrected. She smiled. I didn't think I'd get to say that again. Before I could reply, a car slowed on the road below. My breath caught. It was an old pickup, dark and familiar. It idled for a moment, then moved on, dust curling in its wake. Marin noticed it too. Her hand tightened on the armrest. "That was him, wasn't it?" "Maybe," I said quietly. "But he's just passing by now. He has no power here anymore." She exhaled, long and slow. "It still makes me shake." "That's what fear does," I said. "It visits long after danger leaves. But it doesn't stay unless you invite it in." She nodded, her shoulders easing. Together, we watched the horizon until the sound of the engine faded into the distance. That night, after she and Orion went home, I stayed on the porch long after dark. The air smelled of grass and rain. The world felt clean again, washed free of its old weight. I looked toward the road where the truck had disappeared and spoke into the quiet. "Go find your peace, Cormac," I said. "You'll need it more than we do." When I went inside, I stopped by Eliza's picture. "We've come a long way," I whispered. "The house is ready. The hurt has turned to something that can grow." The fire had burned low, just embers now, but it glowed warm and steady. Outside, spring sang softly through the open window, new life rising from the ashes of what had been broken. Chapter 8, The Final Reckoning. Summer came early that year, warm and generous. The Pierce home was no longer just a promise, but a living, breathing refuge. 2 veterans had already moved in, gentle men with weathered faces and quiet gratitude. They helped paint the garden fence and spend afternoons playing checkers under the maple tree Eliza planted when Marin was born. Laughter had returned to the house like an old friend who knew it was safe to come home again. Marin handled the paperwork, the finances, and the phone calls that used to weigh me down. Her laughter filled the hallways now, soft and free of guilt. Orion rode his bicycle in circles around the porch, leaving chalk trails that faded under the sun. Life had steadied, and so had I. Then, one golden evening in June, everything tilted again. I was sitting on the porch with a glass of iced tea, watching Orion race the wind, when a shadow crossed the gate. Cormac stood there, thinner, older, his shirt sticking to his back with heat. His eyes no longer burned with fury but carried something darker. Regret. Maybe. Or the hollow left when pride collapses. Marin came out from the kitchen and froze. Orion stopped pedaling and looked between us, uncertain. "Go inside, sweetheart," she said to him, her voice calm but firm. He obeyed without question, slipping through the door. Cormac's gaze followed him. "You've built quite the picture here," he said quietly. "The perfect family, the perfect house. Everyone thinks you're saints now." I didn't rise. "What do you want, Cormac?" He walked closer, stopping just short of the steps. "A chance to explain," he said. "A man makes mistakes. Some he can't fix, but he can try." Marin's voice trembled. "You forged my father's name. You hit him. You nearly stole everything he and Mom built. What's left to explain?" He looked at her with eyes that had lost their arrogance. "I was scared," he said. "Business was collapsing, debts piling up. You were talking about moving, about wanting more for Orion. I thought I could fix everything if I just pushed fast enough. But I didn't see what I was breaking. I studied him for a long time. He wasn't lying, at least, not to himself. Desperation had stripped him of the charm that once fooled everyone. He looked like a man haunted by the truth that arrived too late. "You can't undo what's been done," I said. "But you can stop running from it." "I'm not asking forgiveness," he said, voice low. "I came to tell you I'm leaving. The charges stand, the fines too. They took the business, the truck, the lot. I'll be starting over somewhere far from here. But before I go, I wanted to see you both and say, I'm sorry." Marin's hand gripped the porch rail. I saw her jaw tremble as years of anger met the first glimmer of closure. "You should go," she said softly, "before the boy comes back out." He nodded once, turned, and walked toward the gate. His boots stirred dust, but made no sound. When he reached the road, he stopped and looked back at me. "You're a better man than I'll ever be, Harlan," he said. "I see that now. I'm just a man who learned too late what silence can cost," I replied. He gave a small nod and walked away. The wind carried him down the road until the horizon swallowed him whole. Marin sat beside me, her shoulders shaking. "I thought I'd hate him forever," she said. "But I just feel empty." "That's what forgiveness feels like at first," I said. "It's not joy. It's space, space where pain used to live." She leaned against me, and we sat together as the sun began to set. The light caught the old windows, turning them to gold. Inside, the residents' laughter floated through the halls. One of them was singing softly to a radio tune from decades ago, and the house hummed along, steady in content. Later that evening, after Marin and Orion went home, I walked through each room. The floors creaked under my steps, but the sound comforted me. It was the sound of life returning. I paused by Eliza's photograph in the hallway. Her smile, frozen in time, looked brighter than it had in years. "I kept my promise," I whispered. "They're safe. The house stands." Outside, the last of the sunset bled into twilight. Fireflies blinked in the yard, tiny lanterns over the grass. The air smelled of cut hay and lilacs. Before going to bed, I stood by the porch once more, gazing toward the road where Cormac had disappeared. I didn't hate him. Pity, maybe, but not hate. The world had already punished him in the only way that mattered, by making him see himself clearly. In that quiet, I understood something I hadn't before. Revenge had never been the point. Strength wasn't in the strike. It was in the endurance, in the refusal to let cruelty decide the ending. The Pierce home shone behind me, windows lit, laughter alive. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was proof that a life, no matter how scarred, could begin again. I turned off the porch light and whispered to the night, "It's done now, Eliza. We're home." And as the fireflies drifted like falling stars over the yard, the old man with the healed black eye smiled. Not because he had won, but because he had finally found peace. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away, hit like to honor every parent who's loved more than they were loved back. Share this video so others remember. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's strength in its purest form. And if you believe every quiet soul deserves a second chance, type, "He found peace," in the comments. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful, emotional stories that remind us all what family, loss, and redemption truly mean. Because sometimes, the quietest victories are the loudest lessons.